the dealer has misled you or done something else that breaches your rights under consumer law.
Okay. Thank you for that quick summary. Jessica Wilson, thanks from Consumer New Zealand. Air New Zealand, the new, very slick and all local Air New Zealand safety video. Have you seen it?
Yes.
No.
Did you like it, Moira?
I thought it was fun. I mean, I fly a lot for work and because I have family in other parts of New Zealand, so I've seen a whole run of them. Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was eye-catching, which I guess is the point.
With Kings and Julian Dennison and a cast of 600.
And make sure your mask is fitting legit before you go helping the kids. It's Kiwi to rock around, it's safe and fly. It's Kiwi. It's Kiwi. It's Kiwi.
If an emergency were to happen during takeoff or during landing, just follow these instructions in the sign that we're jamming.
It is really well done. Is it any use for safety?
I think, you know, when you sit on planes and the safety video comes on, or even the staff doing a safety demonstration, so many people are just not watching. At least with a bit of lively music, people are more likely to pay attention and see what's happening, even if it's just to follow the story.
Okay. Agree. I fly a lot as well, and I must say the last one was really wearing out.
But should you be expected, because it wears out anyway after you've seen it 3 or 4 or 5 times, obviously, even no matter how good it is. So should you be expected, Chris, to sit and watch it dutifully each time?
I understand the reasoning behind it is that the crew they don't know whether you've been on the plane 1,000 times in the last year, 20 times in the last month, or for the first time ever. So that's the only way they've got of telling that you're actually taking any attention to the safety notices. And you see that, I've seen that with people in a couple of earthquakes. Half people are going to forget their messages and they're going to freeze. So you don't want 250 plus people in an A320 all sitting there going, oh, what do we do now if something does go wrong?
It's a very good point. Fireworks, I know it's yesterday's news, but maybe we're over it for another reason. Matt, the rubbish runner, has sent us a photo of all the fireworks detritus on Pines Beach near Kaipoi. That's where he lives, I think. And Matt says maybe another reason to ban fireworks. This morning's 4K run, 450 plus pieces of human-made items, mainly fireworks. So Matt's picked them up and put them in a big box. Isn't that good of him?
Kapai Matt.
Kapai Matt. I think his business is making jewellery from industrial waste, but I don't know if he'll be able to make anything from a used
It was the same
boy.
Mission Bay, you know, one of the most beautiful beaches we have in the country was covered in all that crap this morning as well.
Is it time for the annual Bang Bang to go west? Do you think we're seeing the last few years of Guy Fawkes?
I think so. I think big public displays, yes. I saw an interesting suggestion that some countries are now using silent fireworks, which is kind of interesting. So you get the same visual extravaganza without the bang crash. But in your back garden, those days are probably over.
Okay.
I have a very, very different view on it now that I'm a horse owner, because so many horses get injured because they're a flight animal and their only mechanism to get away from something scary is to run. At night they run into fences and they rip their legs up and sometimes break their legs and sometimes break their necks.
Indeed. It's funny you should mention horses, because the race that stops a nation is on the way. Who shot the barman likes the rain, you never know. Thank you, Moira Lawler. Thank you very much for being on the panel.
Thank you.
Chris Wikata, always a pleasure.
Likewise.
And we'll see you tomorrow, everybody.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's program, the race that stops a nation will not stop Checkpoint, but we will bring you the Melbourne Cup live and all the reaction afterwards. Be warned, monsoon-type weather is hitting Flemington ahead of the race, so anything could happen. Also tonight, Czech smuggler Karl Schrubeck lays claim to a multi-million-dollar Remuera house in the name of his in-laws. We'll have the details and we'll speak to a former prisoner who was inside with him. More than 1,000 hospital midwives vote to strike, and David Seymour's calling for Jerry Brownlee and Trevor Mallard to pay back $24,000 for a trip to Japan to see the All Blacks.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten tēnei. The Midwives Union says there's an urgent midwifery shortage and its workers cannot cope with the demand. More than 1,000 midwives employed by district health boards have voted to reject the latest pay offer and go on strike. They'll walk off the job for 2 hours every day for 2 weeks from November the 22nd. They turned down a 9% pay rise over 18 months, 2 pay step increases and a lump sum payment. The union's industrial co-leader Jill Ovens says they're working at crisis point.
There's a huge midwifery shortage in New Zealand, and the level of acuity and complexity of birthing has increased. So there are more difficult cases and fewer midwives in the DHBs.
Jill Ovens. A DHB spokesperson Jim Green says the boards are seeking mediation with the union to find a way forward and to prevent industrial action. New Zealanders have spent $7.5 million at the TAB on today's Melbourne Cup race meeting, 8% more than last year. The Irish horse Yucatan is the current favourite, although heavy rain earlier today has shortened the odds on the English horse Magic Circle. The race is about to get underway and will cross live for commentary when it does. The National Party has revealed yet more information as it challenges the ministerial decision to allow convicted Czech drug smuggler Karel Srubeck to stay in New Zealand. A 2010 court document says a witness in the case where Srubeck was facing charges of aggravated robbery and kidnapping. And now we'll just break into our news. And courtesy of Trackside, we're crossing live now to Flemington for the Melbourne Cup.
Von Jamask out well. There's a wave coming towards the outside. Runaway Finch and also Ace High. A Prince of Arran's trying to tuck in behind them with Sir Charles Road. Ventura Storm is nice and close early with Nikita. Very deep early is Rostropovich onto the course proper. And with 500 metres to go on the first lap, it's Von Jamask and Runaway, followed by Finch and a Prince of Arran. Ace High out deeper, and then came Sir Charles Road. Aubrey tucked away the inside, Rostropovich out deeper, then Young Star, Soundcheck and Ventura Storm from Magic Circle. Yucatan is 4 deep, Nikita the inside from Chestnut Coat, and then Muntaha Red Cardinal. Back in the field then is the Cliffs of Moore as they run past the stands from Who Shot the Barman. Now the Cliffs of Moore has gone amiss, I'm afraid. At the back of the field, the Cliffs of Moore has gone amiss and checked a couple of runners. So they leave the straight now with 2,200 metres to go, and Runaway is the leader in the Lexus Melbourne Cup by a length and a half and slows it right down. From in second place, Ace High. Von Jamask is third and Finch in fourth place. Fifth is Rostropovich out deeper from Sir Charles Road, a Prince of Arran. Then Soundcheck, who can't get in. Young Star is underneath of it, and they were followed by Ventura Storm and Aubrey. Yucatan is next on the outside from Magic Circle, and then came Chestnut Coat, the outside of Nikita. Further back is Muntaha and Who Shot the Barman, the veterans very deep from Red Cardinal. Then came Best Solution, Marmello. Well back is Cicada, and they were followed by Cross Counter at the back of the field with Avilius. Heading towards the 1,400 metres in the Melbourne Cup, and it's Runaway in front by a length to Finch, who's working up on the outside. They were followed by Ace High, third the outer. Then came the inside Von Jamask, and next in the field as they run towards Jaquita Lodge with 1,200 metres to go is Soundcheck, and then Sir Charles Road. Next in the field is Rostropovich around a Prince of Arran, then Ventura Storm. The inside next is Aubrey, and then came Young Star, a length to Magic Circle. Next is Yucatan around those with Nikita. A length away to Chestnut Coat, Who Shot the Barman, followed by Muntaha Red Cardinal. Well back in the field then is Marmello, and then came Cicada, and they were followed by Cross Counter towards the back of the field. Best Solution second last, and Avilius last. So it's Runaway coming up towards the turn in the Melbourne Cup at the 700. Leading from Finch, Von Jamask, then Ace High. Sir Charles Road sneaking up on the inside, a Prince of Arran making up ground. Then Ventura Storm, Soundcheck. Yucatan about 6 off the lead around the turn, followed by Aubrey and Nikita. Finch up to Runaway, followed by Von Jamask. Sir Charles Road, a Prince of Arran's presenting from Ventura Storm and Rostropovich. 300 to go. It's Finch with a Prince of Arran on the outside. Rostropovich is running on, and Marmello back to the inside too. A Prince of Arran at the 200. Marmello wearing it down. Marmello gets up on the inside, and here comes Cross Counter. Cross Counter coming at Marmello. Cross Counter's flying. The Blue Army have done it at last. Cross Counter Sir Charles Road and Best Solution, Mundaha, Ventura Storm, Yucatan, well back in the field, Zakata Nikita, Chestnut Coat, Von Jamask, then Sound Check and Ace High Runaway, Magic Circle, Who Shot the Barman, a long gap Red Cardinal, and then came a Villiers, and Aubrey was one of the last to complete the course.
No, he didn't do much. He was gone at 600.
And that was the Melbourne Cup for 2018, and we'll go back to the news. The National Party has revealed yet more information as it challenges the ministerial decision to allow convicted Czech drug smuggler Karel Srubeck to stay in New Zealand. A 2010 court document says a witness in the case where Srubeck was facing charges of aggravated robbery and kidnapping ended up in a police protection program with his family. There's already an investigation into the information on which the Immigration Minister based his decision. The new information was revealed when Nationals leader Simon Bridges asked this question of the Prime Minister in Parliament this afternoon.
Is she aware that one of the criminal charges Karel Srubeck has faced resulted in the police placing an entire family into New Zealand's witness protection program?
Mr. Speaker, as I've said many times, there's a range of reasons why we have gone back to immigration.
Jacinda Ardern speaking in Parliament this afternoon. The Auckland Council says it's on track to sorting out a botched resource consent process that led to hundreds of people being required to reapply or risk breaking the law. The issue relates to properties in historic suburbs like Devonport and Grey Lynn, where the Environment Court ruled in August the wrong consents were issued. The Council's Plans and Places Auckland manager Phil Reid says the consenting team is working on altering the unitary plan to settle the problem. He says the Council is hoping to put its plans out for public consultation by December the 6th. An Auckland vehicle inspector has been suspended after admitting to a series of failings, including certifying a vehicle even though it was still damaged. The Transport Agency says repair certifier Dale Barlass is the third inspector suspended in an investigation by lawyers. It says complaints were lodged against Mr Barlass, who admitted to failing to follow the required standards when inspecting and certifying a vehicle. It says he also admitted to not using manufacturers' repair processes. This is one of 152 vehicle inspection cases being investigated because of safety concerns. Ministry officials have been directed to do in-depth research into the exploitation of temporary migrant workers in New Zealand. The officials, assisted by Auckland University researchers, will seek a range of perspectives, speaking with migrants, international students, businesses and workers. The Immigration Minister Ian Lees-Galloway says he'll consider the findings and make decisions next year. He says in the meantime the government will keep cracking down on exploitation, such as workers being underpaid or working excessive hours. The Queensland Police say a 33-year-old Victorian man who died after a shark attack yesterday was on a boat with several medical friends, including 2 doctors, who did all they could to try to save him. The 12-metre yacht was anchored in Whitsunday Island's Sid Harbour at the time. The man was using a stand-up paddleboard when the shark bit him on the wrist and leg. He was airlifted with critical injuries to Mackay Base Hospital and rushed into surgery, but died overnight. 2 tourists, a 46-year-old woman and 12-year-old girl, were attacked in separate incidents in the same area in September. Inspector Steve O'Connell says the attacks are surprising.
I've been in the Whitsunday area on and off for 30 years, and apart from some minor nips and bites here and there over that period of time, I've never heard of any substantial attacks such as what we've seen in these 3 attacks.
Steve O'Connell of the Queensland Police. That's the news.
Banks on notice.
We've got to make sure that every bank does that. If they don't, then not only will they be named and shamed, but we'll have to be put in a position to move against that.
Smoking in cars with kids.
I bet I know what children would say. As Children's Commissioner, I'm saying it for them. Ban it, stop it and move on it.
And all bets on for the Melbourne Cup.
It's a very difficult race for people to bet in because it was just New Zealand versus Australia, and New Zealand would win every year.
Stick with the winner. Morning Report, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, the prevalence of animal testing in New Zealand and advances in the alternatives. And after 10, working in disaster zones. We met Médecins Sans Frontières doctor and TV presenter Javed Abdelmonem. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waikato, also Coromandel Peninsula and Taupo. Mainly fine, isolated showers tomorrow. Bay of Plenty in Gisborne to Wairarapa, fine weather. Warm about Gisborne and Hawke's Bay tomorrow. Waitomo to Wellington, including Taumaranui and Taihape. Also Nelson and the Marlborough Sounds, cloud increasing. Patchy drizzle tomorrow. For the remainder of Marlborough and Canterbury, fine. Severe northwest gales about the Canterbury High Country tomorrow night. For Bulla to Fiordland, rain developing about Fiordland and southern Westland tonight, then spreading northwards tomorrow and becoming heavy. Thunderstorms possible in the south tomorrow. Otago and Southland, occasional rain about Stewart Island. Elsewhere, cloudy periods, patchy rain this afternoon and evening, scattered rain tomorrow afternoon. And for the Chatham Islands, becoming fine this afternoon, cloud returning tomorrow evening. It is 11 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. Let's go back to Melbourne now, where British horse and third favourite Cross Counter has just won the Melbourne Cup. In the crowd at Flemington for his 27th Melbourne Cup on the trot is New Zealand racing commentator Des Coppins. Hi, Des.
G'day, Lisa. How are you?
Great. That was a pretty exciting finish. Relive it for us. Pretty hard fought near the last 500.
Yeah, it certainly was. He's amazing horses, Cross Counter, and a great trainer too. Charlie Appleby from Newmarket in Great Britain. Starting the horse first up, as they say. Hadn't raced for several months, but a well-conditioned man of horses is Charlie Appleby. And he knows the Australian market pretty well because he's been out here a few times. And so he's got the gold with the Cross Counter. And this horse, believe it or not, is only a 3-year-old Northern Hemisphere time, even though he's now booked as a 4-year-old. He's actually only 3. So to win this race is basically going the same path as the horse that won the Cup last year. He was also exactly the same age, rekindling. So a bit of deja vu there, Lisa.
No luck for Yucatan, who was ridden by the Kiwi jockey. That was the favourite too.
Yeah, James McDonald. I have to watch the replay a few times to give a decent assessment of the horse, but I'd probably be fair to say it was a little bit disappointing. Now, there's a little bit of a skirmish going out of the straight for the first time, and sadly one of the horses broke down badly, Cliffs of Moa, and I'm not sure whether or not Yucatan was involved in that melee or not, but at the end of the day, we have to have a look at the replays because it's a bit soon yet. But it's good to see Michael Walker, New Zealand expat New Zealand jockey, ride in the money in this race with his mount as well. A horse that only qualified to run in the Melbourne Cup just on Saturday by winning the final lead-up race to get into the Cup too. So a Prince of Arran. So good to see number 17 in the mix as well. And Winx's rider, Hugh Bowman, on board Mamello running second.
What's the prize pool? What does the winner take away?
Well, I think that's probably an interesting thing, that the winner takes away a heck of a lot of money. But can I just put that into thinking about this? Kieran McAvoy, who rode the winner, he gets 10% of the winning purse, right? And just 2 weeks ago in Sydney, he rode in the richest race in the world, the race they call the Everest at Randwick, and his paycheck that day was $1 million. Today, he picks up another $500,000, so $1.5 million added together, a 1 minute 12 seconds for the Everest and 3 minutes and 5 minutes work. It's not a bad paycheck, is it, Lisa? Oh,
a bit of a nail biter though, and not without its risk. Do we know what happened to the horse that pulled up lame?
Not too sure, but it doesn't look good, which is very, very sad indeed, because that's something nobody wants to see happen. What happened to the horse? It broke down, and it has broken down badly, but it'll be interesting to know whether or not they can save the horse or not. But it's a very sad situation when you see that sort of thing in front of a packed house of about 105,000 people.
Des, time for a confession here. Did you put money on any of those who came home in the top 3?
Well, I have to say, I got the trifecta. So
you didn't?
Yes, I did.
And?
So it paid $2,500, so that's A-OK, isn't it? Really happy with that. I might have to shout the bar tonight.
As you say, not bad for a couple of minutes' work.
Exactly. No, it was all good. But I tell you, it was a pretty hard race, and halfway up the straight, there were 3 or 4 chances, but all honours with the winner, and he just burst through beautifully. A terrific horse, and I'd be interested to see whether or not he comes back for next year's running of the Cup as well, because he's just a young horse, as they say.
Des, before you go, I do want to just talk about one of the losers, Who Shot the Barman, because at various points that horse seemed to be kind of in play and then not. And obviously it's a lot older than the other starters there, 10 years old compared to the winner, as you say, who's just 3. What do you make of that horse's performance today?
Well, I'd love to know how he finished and where he finished, because as I say, I haven't had a chance to watch the replay yet. But I was at a function last night. I emceed a function for our tour party. We had 100 people there, and the O'Leary boys, they're terrific guys who own Who Shot the Barman. They were our special guests. And they're living the dream. That horse has won over $4.5 million. He won the $2 million Sydney Cup, as we all know. I'm just looking at the replay on the screen now, and I can't see Who Shot the Barman in the top half a dozen or so, but I'll endeavour to find out. But it could have well have been a curtain may have come down on his career today too, and if it has done, he certainly has treated the racing industry proud, and certainly his owners proud too, and Chris Waller, the trainer too. He's done a great job as Chris with the horse. Not sure where he finished, but he certainly has been a legend for sure. Who Shot the Barman?
Appreciate your time this afternoon. That's Des Coppins, a racing commentator. Go off and spend some of his spoils. He picked the trifecta. Lucky man. Let's go now to Auckland's biggest Melbourne Cup party, where our reporter Katie Scotcher and her fascinator joins us live from Ellerslie Racecourse. Hi Katie, what's the atmosphere like out there?
Hi Lisa, well it's very busy here at the moment. Just as the race was starting, everyone was standing around the pens behind me here watching the big screens, and a lot of anticipation. I think a little bit of disappointment that not a New Zealand horse and a New Zealand jockey or trainer didn't win. But yeah, a lot of good atmosphere down here.
Do we know how much money they've been spending out there, or how much was bet on the race from New Zealand?
Well, I haven't been able to get the latest figures, but I know just before midday today that more than $2 million had been bet across New Zealand, which was $500,000 more than the previous year. But I'm sure that number has significantly increased during the day.
Can you relive the moment when it's the last 500, you're watching on the screen, what was going on in the crowd?
Well, there was a lot of cheering. You can't see, but I'm looking up at the big stands where some of the New Zealand trainers are, and everyone was looking over. They had their binoculars out looking at the screen. So a lot of excitement, a lot of nerves as well. But yeah, a really good atmosphere down here. And then obviously at the end of the race, a lot of cheers. There's obviously a lot of drinks around here at the moment too. So yeah, there was a lot of excitement.
It looks like you had a much better day for the race out there as well, and enjoying the fascinator. Katie, thanks for joining us. That is Katie Scotcher out at Ellerslie Racecourse for the Melbourne Cup, of course. And another revelation in the case of convicted drug smuggler Carol Schrubeck played out in Parliament this afternoon after it was revealed a family ended up in witness protection as a result of charges he faced in the past. A witness in a case where Schrubeck was facing charges of aggravated robbery and kidnapping made an appeal to the court in 2010 to give evidence remotely because of fears for his safety. The judge rejected that, but in his decision detailed 2 assaults against him, one involving Schrubeck and a second with Schrubeck and 3 co-accused who had links to the Hells Angels. The witness, his wife and child ended up in police protection. The Immigration Minister's already under pressure over his decision not to deport Schrubeck, who's serving a 5-year jail sentence. And the National Party says this raises even more questions. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
The Minister Ian Lees-Galloway has ordered an investigation into the information he received from officials, which led to his decision to let Schrubeck stay in New Zealand once he's released from jail. Last week it emerged Schrubeck had returned to Europe and probably the Czech Republic, despite fear for his safety being part of the reason he was allowed to avoid deportation. During parliamentary question time, Nationals leader Simon Bridges asked the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern if she knew about this latest information.
Is she aware that one of the criminal charges Carol Schrubeck has faced resulted in the police placing an entire family into New Zealand's witness protection program?
Mr. Speaker, as I've said many times, there's a range of reasons why we have gone back to immigration. to seek further clarification and work to be done, I do want to ensure that we can do that properly. When we're in a position to share more information around the case, then we will do so.
Mr Bridges once again questioned the minister's decision.
Is a criminal someone with charges so serious that an entire family went into a witness protection scheme, someone who should have residency in New Zealand?
Mr Speaker, while I won't get into the specifics of this case while we are going back on it, because I do want to preserve the ability of officials to deal with this appropriately, what I will say is that member well knows, having been in government, that there are some cases which I'm sure that they wouldn't want to go through and pick out information from selectively.
Afterwards, the Minister Enlees Galloway was reluctant to discuss the new information, but had this challenge for the opposition.
If the National Party has additional information that it thinks is pertinent to the investigation, it has two choices. It can continue to play politics by dropping this information in the House or to the media, or it can participate constructively with the investigation so that we can get good, robust information for any future decision that has to be made. It's up to the National Party how they play this. They've got an opportunity to be constructive if they want to.
National's immigration spokesperson Michael Woodhouse says it's his role as an opposition MP to bring such information to light.
The Minister has already accused me of playing politics. Me rolling into Immigration New Zealand with a handful of papers would be playing politics. He is responsible for this. He's responsible for the people that his officials should or should not meet. He's launched an investigation, and I'm sure he's given them terms of reference. They clearly don't involve talking to me.
The investigation has been given a 3-week deadline, but both the Prime Minister and Mr Lees Galloway want it done a lot more quickly than that. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
Well, call him Jan Antalik or Carol Schrubeck. Either way, it is a tangled web of information that surrounds him and his fight to stay in New Zealand. Checkpoint can now reveal he's laying claim to a multi-million-dollar house that's in the name of his in-laws and is being sold by an Auckland real estate firm. Convicted drug smuggler, inmate, champion kickboxer turned political football. Who is the real Carol Schrubeck, or should we say Jan Antalik?
I spent 12 months in a 6-person residence within the Wiri Auckland South Correction Facility. So, yeah, I got to know him pretty well. It's a minimum security environment where each person gets a room, a shared lounge, shared cooking facilities. So, you spend 17 hours a day with this individual, so you get to know them well.
That's Alex Sweeney, former prisoner and effectively Antalik's jail flatmate. Inside, Antalik works as a gym instructor and for a building supply company.
But his day started with yoga. And that was a voluntary yoga exercise that he led within the residence.
You heard right, yoga. John Sinclair is Jan's prison yoga instructor. Sees him every Tuesday.
His demeanour was always very sort of serious and, we're here to do yoga, let's get on with it.
The so-called Czech gangster is training to be an instructor himself.
If he was a gangster before he came in, he is a diametrically opposed person and a changed person.
A recent decision denying Antalik parole confirms no issues with his behaviour in jail, but it notes he's evasive and untruthful and presents a more comprehensive risk of reoffending than his conviction history shows.
I'm not hugging a thug here. I saw plenty of thugs and plenty of gangsters in prison. Jan was not one of them.
That's inside, but beyond the wire, Jan, as the other inmates call him, has extended his hold on a multi-million-dollar Auckland property being marketed by Barfoot and Thompson. Asking price $2.3 million. The section is huge by city standards, more than 1,300 square metres, complete with consent to carve it up into 3 separate titles. Gold, in other words. Here's the online blurb.
Black tie and cocktail dress evenings may be hosted in the formal lounge and dining, while the casual family room is a great place to kick back and relax. The kitchen's got all the modcons for quick, convenient meals.
On paper, 22 Abbott's Way is in the name of Antalik's in-laws. However, an investigation by Checkpoint has revealed Antalik placed a caveat on 22 Abbott's Way on the 26th of October, claiming a financial interest after his marriage broke down. The couple had been living in the 3-bed, 2-bathroom bungalow before he went to jail. It's been reported his wife no longer supports him staying in New Zealand and may seek a restraining order. Here's Jan's yoga instructor again.
My overwhelming impression of him has always been of sort of gentleness and almost shyness. Yeah, I mean, if there are some people who are feeling that he's some sort of volatile, likely to lash out and cause mayhem as soon as he gets out of prison, I'd be very surprised.
So back to that multi-million-dollar property where the title is in the name of Antelik's Russia-based in-laws.
With lead-light windows, exposed timber rafters and high studs.
Documents on the Auckland Council property file show he was involved in plans to develop the site, carve it up into 3 separate sections. Previous court judgments also detail how Jan Antelik paid more than $160,000 into an ASB loan account in his in-law's name to help clear money owed on the Abbots Way property. As a consequence, the police previously put a lien on the site under the Proceeds of Crimes Act. When Checkpoint called agents Barfoot and Thompson last Friday, they were oblivious to the caveat. As for Jan Antelik or Carol Schrubeck's residency case, the immigration minister's reviewing it following revelations that the former kickboxing champ may have travelled home to the Czech Republic, despite claiming his life is at risk if he's deported. Alex Sweeney says Jan's fears are real and were accepted in an earlier court ruling, and they haven't just surfaced with recent media attention.
And there is no doubt in my mind he was deeply, deeply concerned about his chances should he return back to Czechoslovakia as Karel Schrubeck.
You mean life-threatening?
Yep, no
concerns?
question about that.
So the strands are many, but who's pulling what strings and why?
I'm just talking about letting the facts settle, see where the cards fall, but see both sides of this.
And Barfoot and Thompson has ordered a new title and says it's seeking direction from the vendor's lawyer. District Health Board midwives have rejected a pay offer and voted to go on strike later this month. Mirrors, the union for DHB employed midwives, says they were offered the same offer that nurses accepted in August. That was a minimum of 12.5% over the next 3 years. But midwives say they have more training and responsibility than nurses and therefore should be paid more. They asked for an additional 3% or a $5,000 retention allowance until pay equity is resolved. But they say the DHB's rejected both of those proposals. Now 90% of the midwives who voted in the recent ballot have rejected the DHB's offer. I asked Mirrors Industrial co-leader Jill Ovens how the workforce had reached what the union is describing as crisis point.
There's a huge midwifery shortage in New Zealand, and so there are a lot of vacancies around different hospitals, and at the same time as we have actually fewer midwives employed in DHB, the population has grown, particularly in areas like Auckland, and the level of acuity and complexity of birthing has increased. So there are more difficult cases and fewer midwives in the DHBs.
So you were, as you point out, the midwives were offered the same as the nurses and the nurses' pay scale. So what, at a minimum, the pay increase would be 12.4% over 18 months. What's wrong with that?
They were really wanting to have a differential in that would recognise that they have a high level of responsibility and that they are different professional group. So they've been asking for this for a long time, and it's just got to the point where midwives are expected to just wait till the nurses settle and then roll over and take whatever's offered. And one of the things that's really unfair, which we did try to address, is that a new graduate midwife has done an equivalent of a 4-year degree, and she is competent. She is expected to deliver babies and do her full scope of practice from the day she starts, whereas a new graduate nurse has got a 3-year degree and requires a lot of supervision. They get paid exactly the same.
So you say that a graduate midwife is worth more than that graduate nurse. How much more? What's your number? What would make you happy?
Well, we suggested that they start on step 3 of the salary scale.
So how much of an increase would that be?
I can't tell you off the top of my head, but right now they start on 49,000.
Right, and so what would they be paid if they started on step 3? Am I reading right when it says about 56,000? Does that sound right to you, Jill?
That does sound right. I'm just trying to look it up, but yeah, that sounds right.
That to a lot of people is a massive jump. You know, at a time when people are getting 2% pay rises.
Well, if you think about 50,000 as being approximately $25 an hour, it's not very much, is it? It's below the average wage.
So,
and these midwives have a very high responsibility, helping to bring into this world our next generation.
So do you think lives are being put at risk, mums and babies, with current staffing levels and the condition that your midwives are working in DHBs?
The DHB's own report, Workforce Information Report that they released in September, describes it as a crisis. And so I think that midwives work incredibly hard to ensure the safety of women and their babies, but it's under increasingly difficult conditions.
So the strike that they've voted for between the 22nd of November and I think it's the 5th of December, how will that work?
Well, what we've done is that our goal is to, obviously the goal of all strikes is to cause disruption to the employer, but what we want to do is to minimise the effect for women and their babies. So we're taking just 2-hour strikes every day, twice a day, at different times of the day.
So will there always be a midwife available?
Yes, because under the law we have to provide life-preserving services, and we've just been this afternoon talking to the DHBs about that.
But aren't you actually, what you'll end up doing is putting the person who's on shift under more stress, won't you?
Well, we are offering to have somebody else available in the DHB on site if they're needed, more or less on call, which is unusual because normally when you go on strike you walk off the job and you have to leave the site. So that's still to be resolved with the DHB, but that's our offer.
You're offering emergency cover in essence.
That's right, yeah.
Jill, the nurses got a commitment to extra staff as well as their pay rise. Are you asking for a workforce increase as well?
Yeah, that's actually one of the sore points because our understanding was that those extra staff were supposed to include maternity midwives, but it seems that the amount of money that's been put aside, while it seemed huge, was really only probably enough to ease the nursing shortage. And so we are in discussions with the Ministry of Health, and I was talking to them as well today about having a separate provision, a separate accord, if you like, to particularly look at the issues across the whole midwifery workforce, including those who are self-employed in the community that LMCs lead maternity care.
Maris Industrial co-leader Jill Ovens and DHB spokesperson Jim Green will join us live after 6. Coming up, did we get bang for our buck? David Seymour calls for Jerry Brownlee and Trevor Mallard to pay $24,000 back for a trip they took to Japan over the weekend to see the All Blacks. With just hours left to convince Americans to vote for them, candidates across the US are out in force, campaigning to get elected as senators, governors and representatives. And we'll tell you exactly how much New Zealanders spent on the Melbourne Cup. We'd love your feedback. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us at Checkpoint or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. But first, here's Katrina Batten with the headlines.
The British horse Cross Counter has won the Melbourne Cup. Coming from the back of the field at the top of the straight, it crossed the line well clear of Marmello with a Prince of Arran third. Cross Counter was third favourite entering the race, paying $12 at the TAB for a win. It's the third Melbourne Cup win for Australian jockey Kieran McAvoy. Midwives say they've voted to go on strike because of the huge midwifery shortage. Jill Ovens of the Midwives Union says midwives can't cope with the demand and are working at crisis point. She says the level of complexity of the work has increased and they're seeing more difficult cases. A DHB spokesperson says the boards are seeking mediation with the union to prevent industrial action. Nationals leader Simon Bridges has revealed the family of a witness in the convicted Czech drug smuggler case was placed in the police witness protection program. A 2010 court document confirms the information, which arose when Carol Schrubeck was on charges of aggravated robbery and kidnapping. When asked in Parliament today whether she was aware of this information, the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says there is a range of reasons the government has gone back to immigration. The Ministry of Health says it's asking GPs and hospitals to watch out for a once rare strain of meningococcal disease, which is on the increase. The MW strain of the potentially fatal disease is being blamed for an overall rise in the number of meningococcal cases, and authorities say they don't know why. There were 112 cases last year and 96 so far this year. 24 of them have been of the MW disease, including 6 deaths. An Auckland vehicle inspector has been suspended after admitting to a series of failings, including certifying a vehicle even though it was still damaged. The Transport Agency says repair certifier Dale Burlass is the third inspector suspended in an investigation by lawyers. It says complaints were lodged against Mr Burlass, who admitted failing to follow the required standards. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Thanks, Katrina. Turning to business news now with Nona Peltier. Let's get to the most important financial news of the day, Nona. The sweepstake.
Oh, that's right. I did. I got a place, so my Marmello won. Yay.
Yay. So your markets have been boosted.
That's exactly right.
In all seriousness, the Financial Services Federation is telling the government it would be better off enforcing consumer credit legislation as it stands, I assume, rather than changing it. So what's the concern?
Well, they're saying it's going to add a lot of complexity, which is unnecessary, that those costs will be passed on to consumers, and that their members are already responsible lenders. They tend to get the information from people who want to borrow money, lend responsibly, and charge a reasonable interest rate. So this change will affect all of those people, as well as the loan sharks who don't follow the law now. They're saying the real issue is that the law as it stands is not being enforced, that very few cases are brought to prosecution, and so loan sharks are basically doing this type of lending, which is irresponsible, charging over the top. But if they enforce the law as it stands, these things wouldn't happen, and that's the real issue, they said. So what's the difference? They're saying if you change the law, but you still don't enforce it, you're no further ahead.
Status quo remains. Spark, it's pleaded guilty to overcharging some customers for broadband services.
Yeah, that goes back some time though. Now, so this is an older case, back a few years, I guess. 2016 this happened, and they're saying, look, it was a mistake. They admitted it. They tried to refund the money to as many customers as they could once the mistake was found, but unfortunately they weren't able to. They pleaded guilty under the Fair Trading Act. They've pleaded guilty, but they haven't been sentenced, so to speak. So the fine that they're going to have to pay is unknown, but they're expecting it to not be particularly material to their result.
Do we know how widespread it was, the overcharging?
Yeah, they say there was. Well, they say it's a small number of customers. I don't know what a small number exactly is. But in any case, small or not, the Commerce Commission didn't think it was enough to be ignored. So, yeah.
And small is relative, isn't it? Okay,
yeah, it is, yeah.
What happened on the markets today?
Well, actually, Spark's share price rose 2.25% to $4.07, up 9 cents. So I guess the market wasn't too worried about that. And actually, as a matter of fact, the market overall ended up 0.4%, up 38 points to 8,816, which is pretty good because the Asian markets are nervous ahead of these midterm elections. A lot of uncertainty, and all this uncertainty is causing what they call a wobble, so at least it's not a sea of red today. Our currency is slightly weaker at 66.5 cents. That's US cents. That's not too bad. 92.2 Australian and 50.9 pence.
Thanks, Nona. Triumphant
I'll
after
be spending my $10 wisely, I can tell you right now.
You can report back on tomorrow's financial news. Thanks, Nona. Aged care providers want urgent changes to immigration rules to plug what they describe as gaping holes in their caregiver and nursing workforces. It comes as the Ministry of Social Development is partnering with the recruitment company Midcall to train 160 beneficiaries for aged care jobs. But the aged care sector says while that is a start, it represents less than 20% of the caregivers needed each year to fill the gap. Catherine Hutton reports.
The government's initiative follows a successful pilot that launched in February, which found nearly 40 Auckland beneficiaries jobs in the aged care sector. Aged care providers from 8 regions will soon recruit another 160 beneficiaries. The Social Development Minister, Carmel Sepuloni, says this is a case of matching demand for jobs with those who want work. But she says no one will be forced into jobs.
First and foremost, it's about making sure that MSD clients are going into work that is sustainable and meaningful to them. We know that makes the difference with respect to how long they stay in that employment and whether or not they end up back on benefit. So this is not a situation, and we won't be getting into a situation where we're forcing people to take up particular work.
The Aged Care Association's Simon Wallace says the initiative doesn't address the gaping holes in the caregiving and nursing workforce. Currently there are 85,000 people over the age of 85. That's expected to increase to 220,000 in 20 years' time. To meet this projected growth, he says the aged care sector needs 1,000 caregivers a year each year for the next 10 years. And last year's pay equity settlement hasn't resulted in a surge of New Zealanders wanting to work in this sector, despite an increase in wages.
70% of our caregivers are New Zealanders, and we employ and train New Zealanders in these roles. But we've got a gap, and we need to rely on immigration to be able to fill the gap in the workforce.
Mr Wallace says urgent changes are needed to immigration policy so the sector can retain very good immigrant workers.
We train and employ Kiwis, but simply because of the growing ageing population, the fact that we're at full employment in New Zealand at 4%, it means that we need a reliance on some immigration to fill those gaps in our workforce because we just can't find New Zealanders to do the roles.
Mark Buckley manages the Lonsdale Care Centres, which run rest homes in Foxton and Foxton Beach. He says today's announcement is a start, but it's not the whole solution, and rural areas face additional challenges. He employs about 40 caregivers and says it takes particular skills to do the job.
Empathy, compassion, a real desire to work with the elderly, and the ability to work shift work. And that doesn't always suit everybody.
The Minister, Carmel Sepuloni, says this is not the only way people can become caregivers.
MSD is not the only way and not the only agency or organisation that's facilitating these job opportunities. And as I said, some people choose to take a direct pathway through educational opportunities that exist through polytechnics and other places.
She's confident the ministry will be able to fill the 160 jobs and says if the scheme is successful, it will look at increasing the number of places. Meanwhile, the Immigration Minister, Ian Lees-Galloway, says one of the government's top priorities is to better match the skills and talents that migrant workers bring with what's needed in the country's workforce. He says work is currently underway to develop a more responsive immigration system, and as that work progresses, he will look at whether the changes which were brought in under the previous government that affect the aged care sector are still fit for purpose. At last year's election, Labour campaigned on reducing the number of immigrants, particularly in areas where the jobs could be filled by New Zealanders. For Checkpoint, ko Catherine Hutton, tēnei.
With just hours left to convince Americans to vote for them, candidates across the US are out in force, campaigning to get elected as senators, governors and representatives. The first polls close tomorrow at midday New Zealand time. Americans are voting for all 435 seats in the House and 35 of the 100 Senate seats. Also campaigning hard is the US president, because even though Donald Trump's name is not on the ballot, it may as well be, the election results will help define the rest of his presidency. Americans to vote for them, the parties The parties of presidents who have low approval ratings tend to do poorly in the midterms, and President Trump's are very low indeed. The CBS's Lindsay Duncombe explains.
You know, the midterm elections used to be like boring, didn't they? Now it's like the hottest thing. These guys.
America is anxious, divided, and about to render a verdict on the first 2 years of Donald Trump's presidency. Trump has 3 rallies today. His closing argument, a strong economy.
Democrats produce mobs. Republicans produce jobs.
And a warning that only a Republican Congress can keep Americans safe from dangerous migrants.
Oh, we're building the wall. No, we're building the wall. Don't worry about it.
The Cleveland crowd loved it. The racial divisions of this campaign were exposed again today as NBC followed other networks in refusing to air a Republican ad which featured an undocumented murderer interspersed with footage of migrants and asking the questions, who else would Democrats let in? Campaigns have spent nearly $3 billion on television and radio ads, an exhausting onslaught of spin. Sheila Boyd is voting in Missouri.
Tired of the ads. Too many ads. You really can't make a decision because they're throwing stones and negative ads.
Hello, everybody.
Former President Barack Obama barely has a voice left, hoarse after a weekend shouting praise for Democrats. Today, he brought donuts to the campaign office of Senator Tim Kaine and congressional candidate Jennifer Wexton.
You know, we're seeing a record number of women who are running. And Lord knows we need more women in charge.
More women are running, and more women appear to be voting early in states that allow it. Overall, more than 30 million Americans have already cast their ballots, double the number that voted early in the 2014 midterm elections. Enthusiasm that sounds promising for Democrats looking for change.
You're going to hear all the stuff today about early votes coming in. That's all.
But as Republican Senator Marco Rubio told voters in Florida, early voting pointed to a Democratic victory in 2016. Republican support was underestimated.
That's what's going to happen again now. But we have to make sure it happens.
Polling averages reach the same most likely conclusion. Democrats will take control of the House, Republicans will maintain and perhaps expand their majority in the Senate, setting up a mixed government. Both sides would claim victory, and Trump's agenda would be significantly curtailed. That may be the probable scenario, but after 2016, faith in conventional wisdom is shaken.
Who is going to vote on Tuesday?
And the urgency is palpable.
And that is Lindsay Duncombe from CBC. The ACT Party leader David Seymour says Trevor Mallard and Jerry Brownlee's whirlwind trip to Japan at the weekend was a massive waste of taxpayers' cash and they should pay the money back. The budget for the two MPs' trip, which totalled about 48 hours on the ground, including watching the All Blacks, was $24,000. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
Parliament Speaker Trevor Mallard says long-haul air travel holds no romance for him and he wouldn't have flown to Japan if it wasn't good for New Zealand. He and Mr Brownlee flew business class and watched rugby alongside Japanese parliamentarians. Mr Mallard says it was a packed trip with many benefits for the country, but he wouldn't do it for fun.
If someone offered me a trip to Japan where I was on the ground for 48 hours over a weekend and it was free and had no trade benefits, I'd say thank you, but no, I'd rather watch it on TV.
Jerry Brownlee rejects any notion that it was a junket.
No, we were quite busy. We had a proper program that was all facilitated by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And, we've got education links that we dealt with as well. So, look, in the end, it's the people-to-people things that matter most, like most things in life. And it was, from that point of view, very valuable.
But the former Speaker of the House, Nationals David Carter, not impressed.
I would not have done it.
ACT's David Seymour says the whole trip was a jolly.
Look, it's a huge waste of taxpayer money, but it's also an insult to say this was about diplomacy. I mean, come on. There are situations when diplomacy is important, and there may be situations when diplomatic opportunities coincide with sporting opportunities. But when you go all the way to Japan for only 24 hours, and there happens to be an All Black game on at the same time, I mean, the New Zealand public are not not stupid.
The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern defended the trip and the money spent on it.
In a year when we're looking to have the CPTPP come into force, which includes Japan, really important market to us, that there were an opportunity for multiple business engagements and political engagements off the back of that meeting as well, and that would have had value for New Zealand.
Ms Ardern says having other MPs do official work is not unusual, especially as ministers can't be everywhere all the time.
We, of course, are not able to travel consistently. Making use of other members who hold relatively significant positions is something that we do. You know, the Governor-General travels on behalf of New Zealand from time to time, and we get benefit from that as well.
But David Seymour's not having a bar of any of it.
They need to pay the money back. Unless they really believe that the New Zealand taxpayer is gullible, that taxpayer money is not valuable, then they need to pay the money back. Very, very simple gesture. Trevor Mallard earns $300,000 a year. He can afford to pay back $12,000 better than most New Zealanders can afford the taxes for this particular junket.
Atu i te whare pārimata mō te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Chris Bramwell ahau.
National's Deputy Leader Paula Bennett has spoken for the first time since the leak of another recording involving Jamie Lee Ross. Yesterday, an 18-minute recording of a discussion between Leader Simon Bridges, Ms Bennett and Mr Ross, who was still a National MP, was released to the media. The audio recorded on October 2nd revealed Mr Ross being strongly urged to leave Parliament until at least next year, after being confronted with allegations of inappropriate conduct towards 4 or 5 women and disloyal behaviour towards Mr Bridges as leader. Speaking about the recording today, Ms Bennett says there hadn't been any formal complaints from women about Mr Ross, but rather low-level inappropriate behaviour. Ms Bennett told our political editor Jane Patterson she has no regrets about how the situation was handled.
Yeah, look, I think like most of the rest of New Zealand, we're all a bit over sort of recordings coming out from the Jamie Lee Ross camp, and I'm sort of cognisant of where he's at the moment as well, which I think we should be asking those questions to make sure that he's all right. But as far as the actual the conversation that was had that 2 or 3 weeks ago in regards to that, I just sort of stand by what we did and how we did it.
Was there any attempt, I mean, was the intention that his actions, wouldn't be made public?
Oh, look, certainly at that stage with the information that we had, and remember a lot of information's come to light afterwards, at that point with what we had, we were trying to deal with really complex situations around Jamie Lee Ross himself and then some of the behaviours we'd seen.
But I suppose the concern is that, there had been some behaviour that you and Mr Bridges were aware about, and an indication in that phone call that if he kind of kept quiet, then that it wouldn't come out.
Yeah, at that point, with the with what we had, which was really low level, and we'd certainly put that to him, but more around the sort of disloyalty issues as they discussed in the tape.
Were you aware of those the women's complaints at that stage?
Well, as Simon said yesterday, what they weren't were complaints. They weren't complaints. What we had was some pretty low level things that were raised with us that obviously were of enough concern that we'd put them to him, but there are other things.
And is that what you were willing to brush aside?
We weren't brushing anything aside. I'm sure you've read or listened to the whole recording. As I say, I think we've made our points pretty clear. We're not really interested in sort of going out there every time that Jamie Lee Ross wants to take one of his secret recordings and try and get you guys to get excited about it.
Can I just ask you one of the questions that I think Jane did before, but just in regard to the concerns with the women, what were the plans around that? Would that have been managed in-house? How would that have been handled?
Yeah, well, as I say, certainly we hadn't had complaints. What we'd had was some low-level inappropriate behaviour. Enough, of course, that we had put it to him. I heard lots of allegations that they were the same as who came out publicly later. Actually, they weren't. So we were dealing with that as the woman wanted them to be.
And in breaking news, a horse that pulled up 600 metres into the Melbourne Cup has been euthanised. The Aidan O'Brien trained the Cliffs of Moher came in to the Melbourne Cup after finishing third in the Caulfield Cup. The Cliffs of Moher suffered a fractured shoulder early in the race, and officials say that the 5-year-old could not be saved. If you're just joining us now, the race was won by British horse Cross Counter. A man has died after being attacked by a shark in the Whitsundays in Queensland yesterday. The attack happened in the same location where 2 other people were injured by sharks in separate incidents in September. The cluster of shark attacks raises questions about whether anything can be done to keep people safer in the water. The ABC's Sarah Sedgie takes a closer look.
The cluster of shark attacks in North Queensland's Sid Harbour raises many questions for shark researcher Dr. Blake Chapman.
Very, very sad to wake up to hear that a man has died overnight. With this being the 3rd bite that we've seen in the last about a month and a half, I'm very interested in what's happening there.
A man died after being attacked by a shark there yesterday, and only weeks ago 2 others were attacked and injured by sharks in the same area. After the first 2 attacks in September, shark-controlled drumlines were temporarily installed. It culled 6 sharks, most of which were tiger sharks. Dr. Chapman says the drumlines are used to try and reduce the shark population.
They're a form of population reduction. Their whole purpose is to remove them from the population on the premise that a smaller shark population will result in fewer bites on humans. And so far that's been proven equivocal. We don't see any real justification that measures like that are actually effective, especially not long term.
She says that trying to understand the behaviour of sharks is the best way to keep people safe.
It's been shown through the research that it's far more effective to understand sharks and to get a sense of their movement patterns, what's drawing them into an area, what might have changed in that environment to be bringing these sharks in, and then to educate humans as opposed to just going out and randomly killing sharks. If we can educate ourselves and understand why sharks might be in an area, if there's a spot that's safe to swim versus a spot that's less safe to swim, then that's what's going to really be making a big difference.
Associate Professor Callum Brown is from Macquarie University's Department of Biological Sciences. He agrees there's many gaps in our understanding of the animal's behaviour.
We have a lot more to learn about shark behaviour and what motivates sharks to move. There are lots of different species of sharks and lots of potential things that might drive their behaviour.
Across Australia, different shark management measures are deployed, including surveillance and patrolling. Professor Colin Simpfendorfer is the director of the Centre for Sustainable Tropical Fisheries and Aquaculture at James Cook University.
There's quite a lot of different things going on around Australia, in different places, different strategies are used. Here in Queensland, we've got the very sort of long-term, well-established shark control program that removes large dangerous sharks. Other parts of the country, we're seeing non-lethal approaches, sort of exclusion areas where things are netted, drones doing surveillance, helicopters doing surveillance, people being educated, dangerous sharks being tagged so that we can track their movements and alert people when they're in areas that are close to the swimming beaches, all those sorts of things. The reality is, though, that none of these programs is 100% fail-safe.
He says it's hard for scientists like him to determine which measures are effective.
For most of these things, we actually don't have any good scientific data to really evaluate how effective these things are, because we don't know what would have happened if the control measure wasn't in place. And so that's the real challenge in helping policymakers decide about what the appropriate approach is that we can't actually give them a really hard and fast answer.
Queensland's Fisheries Minister Mark Furner is expected to issue a statement later today.
That is Sarah Sedgie reporting there. Car buyers are being warned off mechanical breakdown insurance when buying a new set of wheels. Consumer New Zealand says the insurance is heavily promoted by dealers and could add more than $1,000 to the purchase price of a vehicle. Jonathan Mitchell reports.
Comedian and RNZ regular Raybon Khan purchased a second-hand BMW from Lee European in Palmerston North in October last year and bought the extra cover as protection. But the cracks soon started to appear. His car's air conditioning system had a fault and needed to be fixed. He found out that the mechanical breakdown insurance hadn't been approved and got told pre-existing faults weren't covered. He then embarked on a lengthy battle despite the setbacks.
This could easily have not gone my way because, as it turns out, the car yard went into liquidation 3 weeks after paying me, which took 11 months. If that had happened 3 weeks in the other direction, I wouldn't have gotten paid. It would have been more grief for me as well as other people.
He was awarded $2,000 for the insurance cover and $2,200 for the repairs. Advocacy group Consumer New Zealand says the cover is hardly worth having and buyers should demand a refund. Its chief executive Sue Chetwin says the Consumer Guarantees Act protects people buying used cars.
We're particularly concerned that they are being missold, that people are being misled as to what they're actually covered for, and also being told that the insurance is compulsory when they're buying cars. So we're saying, people should question very carefully if you buy a car whether you actually do need this vehicle insurance.
The Motor Trade Association, or MTA, represents the automotive sector, including car dealers. Spokesperson Tony Everett says mechanical breakdown insurance can be important, especially to cover used cars once the new car warranty is ended. But he says car dealers must disclose the terms and conditions.
But like in all insurance, the MBI policies all vary to differing degrees. They all have terms and conditions, and they're not all the same. So anyone buying mechanical breakdown insurance policy should make a point of reading the policy and understanding the terms of coverage, because they all do vary.
However, Sue Chetwin says buyers are better off spending the money on a pre-purchase check and then regular servicing. For Checkpoint in Ōtautahi, call Jonathan Mitchell, Tēnei.
And just time for a quick bit of feedback. Steve says Mallard and Brownlee, anything they do in one weekend in Japan is worth more than David Seymour's whole contribution in Parliament.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Patinaho. The Ministry of Health says a once rare strain of meningococcal disease is on the rise for reasons it can't yet explain. The MW strain of the potentially fatal disease is being blamed for an overall increase in the number of meningococcal cases. There were 112 cases last year and there have been 96 so far this year, 24 of them of the MW type, including 6 deaths. The Director of Public Health, Caroline McElnay, says the Ministry is seeking specialist advice.
For some reason, this particular strain of meningococcal disease seems to be becoming more common. And the reason that we've sent out the alert to GPs and to ED departments is that they're aware of that. But also this particular strain does seem to have a higher mortality rate and poorer outcome for patients.
The Director of Public Health, Caroline McElnay. District health boards are seeking mediation with the Midwives Union to prevent a series of planned strikes. Midwives employed by the boards have voted to reject the latest pay offer and strike for 2 hours every day for 2 weeks from November the 22nd. They turned down a 9% pay rise over 18 months, 2 pay step increases and a lump sum payment. A DHB spokesperson, Jim Green, says the boards respect the important role of midwives but believe an excellent offer was made. He says mediation would help find a way forward and prevent industrial action. The Immigration Minister, Ian Lees-Galloway, has accused National of playing politics with the latest revelation about the convicted Czech drug smuggler Karel Srubeck. A 2010 court document says a witness in a case in which Srubeck was facing charges of aggravated robbery and kidnapping ended up in police protection with his family. National says that's further evidence Srubeck should not be allowed to stay in New Zealand. There's already an investigation into the information on which Mr Lees-Galloway based his decision. He says National could play a more constructive role.
If the National Party has additional information that it thinks is pertinent to the investigation, it has 2 choices. It can continue to play politics by dropping this information in the House or to the media, or it can participate constructively with the investigation.
Ian Lees-Galloway. Srubeck was eventually found not guilty of the charges in the High Court in Auckland. Checkpoint has also revealed tonight that Srubeck is laying claim to an expensive house in Auckland's eastern suburbs. Srubeck, or Jan Unterlich as he's also known, has placed a caveat on the title of an Abbots Way property in Remuera that's currently being advertised for sale at $2.3 million. His in-laws, who appear to be based in Russia, are listed as the property's owners. Court documents show Antalik paid more than $160,000 towards clearing a loan held on the house. Lynn's documents show he lodged a financial interest on the title on October the 26th. Cross Counter has become the first British-trained horse to win the Melbourne Cup. The lightly raced 4-year-old gelding finished a length clear of Marmello with a Prince of Arran third. It's the 3rd Melbourne Cup victory for jockey Kieran McElvoy, who had to bring the horse from near the back of the field as they entered the final straight.
A Prince of Arran at the 200, Marmello wearing it down, Marmello gets up on the inside and here comes Cross Counter
That audio courtesy of Trackside. McElvoy admits that at one stage he felt he was too far off the pace to be a contender.
I was back a bit further than what I wanted. I knew I was full of running. The 400 I sort of had to go my own way, and we were full of running. I hit the furlong. I thought, mate, is this happening again? Get on these lovely staying horses, prepared unbelievably well by Godolphin and Charlie Appleby in my third Melbourne Cup.
Kieran McElvoy. The British horse, the Cliffs of Moher, had to be put down after fracturing his shoulder earlier in the race. The backers of a downtown Auckland stadium says the council needs to get behind its bid or risk missing an opportunity to sort out the downtown area for years. The Waterfront Stadium Consortium wants a partly sunken stadium built on Bledisloe Wharf as part of a wider development. When it met councillors today, it asked them to consider getting a feasibility report done. The consortium's chair, Mike Sage, says Aucklanders don't want the proposed car park and the council needs to act now.
If we delay this, the window of opportunity that's currently open to solve Auckland's waterfront and stadium issues in an optimal zero-cost way will shut. If it does, we'll end up with an ugly eyesore on our waterfront for generations to come, and with a city that will have the embarrassment of being unable to host major sporting or entertainment events.
Mike Sage of the Waterfront Stadium Consortium. It's 6:05. To sport, and the All Blacks Black Caps opening batsman George Worker is hoping to make the most of his opportunity in the one-day cricket series against Pakistan in the UAE. He'll open in place of the injured Martin Guptill alongside Colin Munro. The Central Stags batsman last played for the Black Caps 11 months ago and admits he's had lots of time to think about getting back into the side.
That World Cup is obviously 10 months away or so it's certainly a goal of mine to try and make that. Hopefully I get more opportunities this home summer to I guess put my name up in lights and do my best to try and make that squad.
George Worker. Fast bowler Lockie Ferguson has got the fourth pace bowler's spot and Ajaz Patel has been called in as cover for Todd Astle. The series starts on Thursday. Red Bull Racing has described Shane van Gisbergen's now infamous post-race park-in of Supercars champion rival Scott McLaughlin as funny. Series leader McLaughlin has a 14-point lead over his fellow New Zealander and has no shortage of motivation going into the final round in Newcastle. In Auckland last weekend, Van Gisbergen parked so close to McLaughlin the latter couldn't get out of his car. Red Bull manager Mark Dutton says they warned him over the incident, but Dutton has also told supercars.com that some people would see the incident as funny. The Queensland Reds have turned to the son of former New Zealand Rugby League captain Hugh McGahn for a much-needed boost to their playmaking stocks. Former Auckland Blues talent Matt McGahn will add to the depth at the Super Rugby franchise next season following the departures of Quade Cooper and Jono Lance. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Nick Bollinger samples the latest from Julian Dine and Colin Moccasin, among others. There's a window on the world of West Africa's fish famine, which will go nicely with this week's after-dinner speaker, the largely libertarian Eric Crampton, and his thoughts on freshwater management. The path to cleaner rivers could be a cap-and-trade system, he thinks. But what exactly are we capping and trading? Join me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waikato, also Coromandel Peninsula and Taupo. Mainly fine, isolated showers tomorrow. Bay of Plenty in Gisborne through to Wairarapa, fine weather, warm about Gisborne and Hawke's Bay tomorrow. Waitomo to Wellington, including Taumaranui and Taihape, also Nelson and the Marlborough Sounds. Cloud increasing, patchy drizzle tomorrow. For the remainder of Marlborough and Canterbury, fine, severe northwest gales about the Canterbury High Country tomorrow night. For Bulla to Fiordland, rain developing about Fiordland and southern Westland tonight, then spreading northwards tomorrow and becoming heavy. Thunderstorms possible in the south tomorrow. Otago and Southland, occasional rain about Stewart Island. Elsewhere, cloudy periods, patchy rain this afternoon and evening, scattered rain tomorrow afternoon. And for the Chatham Islands, becoming fine this afternoon, cloud returning tomorrow evening. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. Midwives will walk off the wards later this month as they strike over what they say is poor pay. Meris, the union for midwives employed by DHBs, say they were offered the same amount that nurses accepted in August. That was a minimum of 12.5% over the next 3 years. But midwives say they have more training and responsibility than nurses and therefore should be paid more. District health boards say they're positive they'll resolve the pay dispute and avoid the strikes, which are scheduled to run for 2 hours each day from November the 22nd to December the 5th. Jim Green is the spokesperson for the DHB and he joins me now on the phone. Mr. Green, the Midwives Union says that they are worth more than nurses, are they?
Well, that's a topic that we've discussed quite extensively with the Midwives Union over the course of these negotiations, and haven't been able to resolve that. We think that probably does relate to pay equity, and we know that, as you know, there are claims out there within the health sector for various occupational groups to make a claim around pay equity. So we think that's a process that would be covered within that. And, really the offer that we made to this union for their members is a very good one, and we think that that's a good point to move on with that at this point.
They would argue that they've basically been lumped in with the nurses, and clearly the feeling they have is that they are second-class citizens. They are their own profession, they argue, 4 years training, so more than a nurse does, and greater responsibility. So what is that worth?
Well, we wouldn't necessarily share all of those arguments, obviously, and that's part of the discussions that we've been having with them. I think, when it comes down to it, what we've offered them is a very, very substantial pay increase, over $10,000 over the next 18 months, which is quite substantial. And, that's the main thing that we want to talk with them about, and we'll talk further with them, of course. But our biggest focus at the moment, of course, is protecting the safety of women and babies, in this period of strike action that's has been announced.
How are you going to manage during that strike?
Well, we'll have our contingency plans in place. We've already had some discussions with Miris about that and the life-preserving services that we will put in place over that period of time. But it's going to be very disruptive for women and babies, and we're concerned to make sure that they're kept safe over this period of time.
Disruptive in what way? What's it going to mean in practical terms for women who come in?
Well, I think obviously there's a periods of time when midwives will be walking off the job, and we have to arrange to make sure that we provide basic support services for them over that period of time, and have the life-preserving services there to come to be there and to come in to support women should their needs increase over that point of time. But it will mean, and as the union says, it's designed to be disruptive, and that will be disruptive to women. So, for instance, if you are needing a planned induction or a caesarean section, then that will have to be changed around to fit in, to make sure it's safe to do that, when these periods of strike action are on.
So are they being irresponsible in striking?
I think, strikes are always difficult things within the health sector, to make sure that people are kept safe. And that's our main focus in the first instance, to make sure that women and babies will be kept safe over this period of time. And, Miris
can you guarantee that they will be?
Services. We can do the very, very best that we can, and Miris will help us with that, with the life-preserving services. And that, of course, has to be our primary focus at the moment. We haven't actually received a strike notice yet, but we expect to get that soon. And, we'll kick into action already about planning around that. And at the same time, we'll be getting back into talks, with the union about how we might be able to avert this, because that would be the best option.
You seem confident that you'll be able to do it. So does that mean you've got more money that you can throw at this problem?
No, I don't think we're confident in being able to do it. What we are really concentrating on is being able to talk with the union about what might be able to avert this action, because, it will be disruptive, it will be difficult for women and their babies, and we want to avert that if we can.
They're clear about how you can do that. It's more money. So is there more money for the midwives? Have you got more money that you can add to the offer?
Well, I think that, we were in the same situation with nurses as well. They wanted more money, but, there's only a certain amount of money that we've got. We think we've put up a really good deal, and it's quite substantial, and that's what we want to get back and talk with them about what are the issues again about why that doesn't work for them and their members.
But they've rejected what you feel is a really good offer. So, to push forward, is there any more money?
Well, we would have to look about how we're packaging this. That would be the only way that we'd be able to do something that might be able to be acceptable, that we'd be able to get a settlement out of it. And that's going to require more talking, and we need to get back to doing that.
What do you mean, how you package it? What are the options?
Well, we have got a finite amount of money to be able to spend. It's the same with anything. As I said, other unions and other groups of employees always would like to have more than what we're able to offer them. But we always come down to a settlement on that, and we hope that we'll be able to do that with the nearest midwives and their members as well.
All right, thank you for joining us this evening. That is Jim Green, who is the spokesperson for the DHBs, talking there about the strike action that is planned by the midwives. The bells and whistles keep coming for Auckland's proposed downtown stadium, with backers now saying it could contain a Māori cultural centre and Kelly Tarleton's. The Auckland Waterfront Consortium, the group of businesses which have come up with the concept, have been at the Auckland Council today asking for help, and they revealed a little more about their vision in a PR pitch to get the council on side. Rowan Quinn was there.
The stadium could become Auckland's Statue of Liberty or Sydney Opera House, say its confident backers, a partially sunken structure greeting visitors to the city. And says the consortium's chair, Dave Wigmore, it could be so much more.
We've talked about but haven't discussed with Kelly Tarleton the opportunity to come into the basement of this project and relocate from their current location.
At least one councillor seeming amused by that idea, but the backers say the stadium would need to have more than sports and concerts to make it viable, suggesting Ngāti Whātua could run a cultural centre and there could be conferences and stadium tours. All this, they say, at no cost to the ratepayer or taxpayer. But Mr Wigmore says they do need the council and the government's help.
We're not asking you to approve the waterfront development or construction of a waterfront stadium. We are asking you to recognise this is the best and most widely supported proposal that anyone has ever put up so far to transform the waterfront and resolve Auckland's stadium issues.
And they're asking the Auckland Council to consider funding a feasibility report to find out if their vision is a goer in reality. The decision about what to do with the Auckland port is due by 2021, and the stadium backers say they need to know well before then if the project would work. The Deputy Chair, Mike Sage, says that's why the work to test it must begin before the year is out.
Because if we delay this, the window of opportunity that's currently open to solve Auckland's waterfront and stadium issues in an optimal zero-cost way will shut. If it does, we'll end up with an ugly eyesore on our waterfront for generations to come, and with a city that will have the embarrassment of being unable to host major sporting or entertainment events.
Some councillors are questioning how there could be zero cost to the ratepayers if the council does the feasibility work. But the consortium says any costs incurred would be paid back by the future developer. Some councillors remain sceptical. Others, like Sharon Stewart, say the backers are jumping the gun.
Shouldn't you really be out there asking the public, is this really what they want? And I mean, you're telling us that you're hearing that people are wanting it, but like Councillor Clow and others, I'm hearing something a little bit different.
The consortium's also trying to get the government on side, saying they've already met with the Regional Economic Development Minister Shane Jones and plan to meet with the Sports and Recreation Minister Grant Robertson. I tāmaki makaurau mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Rowan Quinn tēnei.
The horse cross-counter has won the $8 million Melbourne Cup at Flemington. Cross-counter entered the final straight near the back of the field and crossed the line well clear of Marmello with a Prince of Aaron third. It was a hideous day at Flemington for the event, but there's been sunshine for many punters watching the race on this side of the Tasman. More than $2 million in bets had been made in New Zealand on the race by midday, up $500,000 on the same time last year. TOB bookmaker Mark Stafford joins me now on the line. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Lisa.
What numbers did you get up to? How much did we spend today on betting?
We haven't got the actual final number, but the indication is it's going to shade last year. Last year it was 10.2 million in turnover on the one race. I'd estimate, we haven't got a final figure yet, it's probably 10.5.
Okay, so just over that. What was the juiciest payout? Who were the big winners?
Well, the interesting thing, I guess if you had the trifecta with cross-counter, which had shortened in when there was some rain around, everyone had got off the favourite, which was Yucatan, which everyone had been backing all week. The rain came and there were just some doubts. So they were looking for other horses to back, and cross-counter was one of those. English-bred horse, hadn't raced in Australia yet, paid 12 and 440. Marmello was second, which a lot of people fancied. And there were some really good place bets landed on the Prince of Aaron, which was ridden by Kiwi Michael Walker, and that paid a really healthy $7 a place.
So overall, though, were there any record bets or any record payouts?
I don't know about record bets, but someone picked up about 35,000 from a $100 bet. They had a series of 3 horses and they all won, and they needed that final winner, cross counter to win, and they got up, so it turned their $100 into 35,000. They've probably got the biggest ratio collect of the day.
Wow, as someone would say, not bad if you can get that kind of work. Are people losing interest in the Melbourne Cup? While it looks like the figures are up, just marginally up, are we going off this race in any way?
I think it really depends, Lisa. Like, over the years, and especially the last decade, the Northern Hemisphere have really targeted this race. It's got world stature now. So if you go back 15, 20 years, half the field were Kiwis. In some years we've got like 1, maybe 2. We've had years where we've had none. And we like having competitors flying the New Zealand flag. This year we had jockeys, trainers, owners, breeders, all involved in the Cup. And that certainly brings the romance back to it. So if we've got New Zealand representation, it certainly hasn't lost its gloss.
So how much did we back the New Zealand connected horses?
Oh, very much. We were around James McDonald. When the rain came, Youngstar, which is trained by Chris Waller, who also trains Winx, who's a Foxton race trainer. Actually, he lives in Australia now, but still very much a Kiwi. They were really in behind that. Moroni had some. Yeah, there was certainly a lot of Kiwi connections, and people that didn't quite know what to do certainly took some New Zealand action. And I know that the function I was at had 700 people at it, and a lot of them had money on Prince of Aaron simply because Michael Walker was the jockey and he was offering a good price.
You'll be pleased to know I think I came third in the office sweepstake. That is Mark Stafford, a bookmaker for the TAB there. $10.5 million worth of bets. They are saying that that's what the total is tracking for on the Melbourne Cup today from New Zealanders taking a punt. Campaigning ahead of the US midterm elections is drawing to a close. The outcome is being seen as a verdict on President Trump's first 2 years in office, as the BBC's John Sopel reports.
His name is not on the ballot anywhere across the United States, but the forthcoming elections are all about Donald Trump. He's put himself at the absolute centre of this campaign, hurtling around the country energetically. And so it's impossible to avoid the conclusion that the results of tomorrow's midterm elections will be a referendum on his presidency. Today, he was in Ohio.
Everything we have created and achieved is at stake on Election Day. It is. If the radical Democrats take power, they will take a wrecking ball to our economy and to our future.
The issue that's grabbed more attention than any other is this: the caravan of immigrants making their way up from Central America and heading towards the US border. The president has deployed thousands of troops and fearsome rhetoric. America is about to be invaded, he says. Fear-mongering, say his opponents. Getting fewer headlines is healthcare, but arguably of far greater concern to many more Americans. The administration stands accused of watering down people's ability to get insurance cover if they have pre-existing conditions.
Make sure we turn out that vote.
The Democrats in this climate are struggling to find their voice, and so they're relying on someone who seems to have lost his.
You vote, you might save a life. That's pretty rare where that happens.
Barack Obama was today campaigning in Virginia and has been the one Democrat still able to draw a crowd and enthuse supporters.
Health care for millions is on the ballot. A fair shake for working families is on the ballot. And most importantly, the character of our nation is on the ballot.
The numbers turning up at rallies, the numbers turning out to vote early are extraordinary. These are midterm elections like no other.
John Sopel reporting there. And staying in America, the US has reimposed significant sanctions on Iran with some temporary exemptions. President Donald Trump has described them as the strongest sanctions the US has ever issued. However, in a letter to the United Nations, Iran says the sanctions were irresponsible conduct, brazenly, boldly and blatantly denying a UN resolution. The BBC's Global Affairs correspondent Naomi Grimley has more details.
Death to America, shout these protesters in Tehran.
Burning the American flag is a yearly ritual on the anniversary of the seizure of the US Embassy in 1979. This week, though, there's extra antagonism as America reimposes oil and financial sanctions on Iran.
Thank you.
The Trump administration wants to reverse a deal brokered by Barack Obama, which aimed to curb Iran's nuclear ambitions in return for better trade. The new sanctions target key pillars of the Iranian economy, including oil, shipping and banking, with more than 700 entities being targeted. But 8 major importers of Iranian oil, including India and Japan, have been granted temporary waivers.
At the center of this effort, and there are multiple lines of effort, but at the center of it is an unprecedented campaign of economic pressure. Our objective is to starve the Iranian regime of the revenue it uses to fund violent and destabilizing activities throughout the Middle East and indeed around the world. Our ultimate goal is to convince the regime to abandon its current revolutionary course.
European powers remain committed to the original Iran nuclear deal. They object to the sanctions, but that puts them at loggerheads with the US. Ordinary Iranians are bracing themselves for a rocky time ahead. The economy has had a tricky year, with oil sales already dropping.
The impact is going to be felt in many ways. People are having less access to food, medicine, jobs are being cut, and rising prices. So there's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty.
But Iran's president says his country won't be cowed.
The Americans should be punished forever. They are bullying a great nation with an old cultural heritage. This is unacceptable to our state.
President Trump says he wants a new deal with the Iranians, which will see them stop their nuclear program and abandon proxy wars in the Middle East. So far, though, there seems little sign of that happening.
Naomi Grimley with that report. With more than 5 million tourists predicted to visit New Zealand by 2024, it's sink or swim for the tourism industry. But there's hope the government's new tourism strategy, as well as a boost in funding, may help the regions thrive. The strategy, which was announced this morning, is focused on sustainable tourism growth and sharing the benefits of tourism across regions. Our tourism reporter Tess Brunton spoke to regional mayors to find out if they're on board.
As regional New Zealand braces for the onslaught of summer tourists, mayors around the country are looking to cover the costs of much-needed infrastructure. There is support available. The provincial growth and tourism infrastructure funds have provided lifelines for some regions, but others say it's not nearly enough. Westland District Mayor Bruce Smith says the government is on the right track, but the infrastructure money might be quickly swallowed up by more pressing day-to-day needs.
It's probably not a lot different to health funding and education funding. There's never enough, but it's a great start. I mean, take Westland, and we know that Hokitika and Haast and potentially Ross, they're running at capacity for their sewage systems. This ongoing contestable funding is going to be an option for us that we just simply don't have at the present time.
Tourism Minister Kelvin Davis says growing visitor numbers have demanded a new approach. Last year there were 3.7 million visitors. But in 5 years' time, there could be as many as 5.1 million visitors, more than the current population of New Zealand. Bruce Smith says he's happy the minister not only wants to talk about the future of tourism, but has committed the funds.
Every district in New Zealand has got a different issue, and without a discussion, we're not going to be able to go forward. But this minister's focused on having a discussion. There's some money coming. I mean, 40 million's a lot of money.
Bruce Smith says if the regions with the most tourists and fewer ratepayers can claim a slice of the funding, it will work out well. But Queenstown Lakes District Mayor Jim Bolt says his district's needs will certainly not be met by what's currently on offer.
The half of the levy that's available for tourism is less than we need as our area in isolation. So, no, it's not going to solve our problems.
Jim Bolt says he's in discussion with the government to find a solution. Today's strategy outlines different targets for tourism to thrive without impacting local communities. Along with the strategy, the government confirmed the $35 tourist tax, announced earlier this year, will be split between the conservation and tourism sectors. That will give the tourism sector up to $40 million of extra funding. Rotorua Lakes Mayor Steve Chadwick says she's happy this strategy focuses on sustainability, a message set out clearly in the Te Aki Promise announced by the government last week.
We ought to be educating visitors and international visitors about nurturing
the very land that's giving them a wonderful tourism experience. So that's all these little bits add up.
As the tourists start to make their way to the Kaikoura district, Mayor Winston Gray says while the government help is a good start, it's not going to be enough.
We've sort of got to work on our own, but government is certainly there supporting us through the Tourism Infrastructure Fund. That's going to help with tourism, etc. We just can't do it on our own. We have a lot of tourists come to Kaikoura, so we really do need help. Probably not enough, to be honest. I mean, 3 or 4 or 5 toilets is $700,000 or $800,000. But hey, it's a start. We can work on it from here.
Waitaki District Mayor Gary Kircher says the different regions need to work with each other and share the funds around. And the strategy needs to ensure tourists and locals get along.
I mean, we're keen to see tourism spread around the regions better. The competition which currently exists, if we're going to grow tourism, we actually have to share it around, make sure that the tourists have a good experience, make sure the locals still have their space, and make sure that we've got the infrastructure to deal with it all.
The draft tourism strategy is open for submissions from the public until February. For Checkpoint, Cortes Brunton, Tēnei.
Just enough time for a bit of your feedback regarding the midwives' strike later this month. This person says the DHB rep keeps talking about their concern for women and babies, but how about showing concern for the women midwives who are struggling to support their kids and families on poverty wages? And on the trip to Tokyo to watch the rugby, Jerry Brownlee and Trevor Mallard's trip, this from Camilla. Each MP flying to Tokyo and back punched out 5.5 tonne of carbon. Is that good for New Zealand? Not just a jolly, but a polluting jolly. We will be back tomorrow with all the results from the US midterm elections.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Ministry of Health has asked GPs and hospitals to watch for a strain of meningococcal disease that seems to have a higher mortality rate. DHBs are seeking mediation with the Midwives Union to stop planned strike action going ahead. The Immigration Minister has challenged National to stop playing politics and take a more constructive role in the case of convicted Czech drug smuggler Karel Schrubeck. And Lynn's documents have revealed Schrubeck has an interest in a $2 million Remuera house. Cross Counter has become the first British-trained horse to win the Melbourne Cup. And the British horse The Cliffs of Moher had to be put down after fracturing his shoulder earlier in the race. And the backers of a downtown Auckland